Okay, welcome to A Better Lifestyle, everybody. Today I have the pleasure to have Cameron Tope with me. Welcome, Cameron, to the podcast.
Richard, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. So, tell us who is Cameron Tope? What do you do? And we'll take it from there.
Man, I think, I'm just like an average Joe. I was originally born in Ohio and found my way into an engineering degree, moved to Houston. It was actually petroleum engineering, and the oil market was going crazy. It was like $120 a barrel, and then it crashed down to, like 30, and then eventually actually went negative. So I was looking around like I had a bunch of student loans, $30,000, $40,000 of student loans. And I'm like, what is going to happen? Or what can I do? Worried to death about my job being 22, 23. And some of these old timers were just Joe Cool. They were not worried about the layoffs. They were just calm, cool, and collected. And so I started asking them questions, and come to find out they had bought a handful of rental properties. So they were just like, hey, if I lose my job, no big deal. I've got a handful of rentals that'll bring me some passive income. So that's what I did. I just started buying rental properties aggressively, working 100-hour weeks. I would work my job, and I would go out and from 5 to 10, just put out bandit signs, do, cold calling, whatever I could do to scrounge together some real estate deals. Got myself up to a portfolio of just over 30 properties. And then in 2020 was able to walk away from that. I actually left on my own accord on that W-2 job. And then from there, I had all these properties. And I couldn't find anybody to manage them, Richard. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? So I had somebody, I'd interview property managers. It didn't work out well. They weren't doing so hot. Or I just didn't get the response or care. So I said, I'm going to do it myself. And then we started that, I guess, in 2019. And now today, Emerson manages about 300 properties across the greater Houston area. And I do that all 100% remotely from San Diego.
Okay. Congratulations.
Thanks, man. We got a
Uh,
long way to go, but yeah, we're taking the right trajectory.
all right. So what are the global services that a company offers, and what are their obligations?
Global services, interesting. I think the big thing that we do is affordable housing, right? Like being able to take into consideration providing safe and affordable housing for people. I think that's probably the big thing we do on a global scale. That like taking care, especially Houston being a city where it's one of the most diverse cities in the country. There are people from all over the world that come in from shipping, for medical, all the different industries. Oil and gas brings in a huge number of folks. So I think one of the things that we do that probably impacts, I know it impacts more than Texas, but across the country and across the globe is just provide great housing to people. People bring over their families or friends. And I think that's probably one of the biggest areas of responsibility that we have as a property management company.
Okay, when I mean like full service, I mean like responsibilities like repairs,
Oh,
lease tenants, all that, like the full service that a company provides for an owner.
Oh yeah, yeah. Good. My apologies. So the full service property management, which is what we provide, is everything soup to nuts. Think about like finding the tenants, screening the tenants, moving the tenants in, handling all the maintenance, all the rent collections, and then at the end, when that tenant does move out, which our tenants stay on average 3 to 4 years, but when that tenant does move out, we handle all the security deposit dispositions, the make ready to get the property back up to rent ready standards, and then list the property on the MLS. So we'll handle everything. There are some folks out there that do like portions of it. Some agents might just do the leasing side, or there are companies that just do the maintenance for you, but we handle the whole kit and caboodle. We also do stuff related to tax purposes. So 1099s, making sure your itemizations are all your expenses are itemized per the IRS guidelines.
Okay. What about financial management and asset management? When I speak about financial on the financial side, I'm talking about uh, paying the bills, or if there's a job, like to not overpay for
Yes.
the job. What about that? You guys handle those things, do you?
Yeah, yeah, and that's a good question. So we consider ourselves asset managers, and that some people get that like, oh man, that sounds like more on the financial side, or you a financial advisor. It really think about asset management as strategy. So that would be saying like, okay, Richard, we've got this 3-2 single family home in in the suburbs, and if we do a $15,000 make ready, we can probably bump rents up a couple $100. So you spend 10, you get an extra 2,400 bucks a year in rent. That's a pretty good return. That's a 24% return. So that's more of the asset management. I would look at property management, which we handle that as well, but we also get the strategic side. Look at property management like execution of actually responding to maintenance requests, actually handling the repairs. And to answer your question, yes, we work with about 50 or 60 different vendors. And I think most property management companies, once you get above a few hundred doors, they should have a good network of contractors, right? It's like you have people that you work with that you know, like, and trust, and they give you good deals because, when I just started and I had one or two properties, I didn't have the weight to be able to say to keep contractors because I might only do a turn once a year, twice a year. Whereas now we're doing 10 to 15 turns every single month, and that's giving work to those guys. So they're giving us a lot of great prices. We handle the billing. We do that all on your behalf or all on an owner's behalf. So, and we make sure we get pictures. The tenants get surveys. So yes, there is a quality control and a quality check on that side as well.
Okay, so you do make sure like to for the asset to perform better, like increase the NOI, reduce expenses and all that, increase revenue. So you guys do that, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And, sometimes it's like you lay out a plan, and what do they say? Man makes a plan and God laughs. But it's like, we'll put a plan together. But, let's just say an AC system is 10 years old and we think it's got another 5 years of useful life. Like, okay, Richard, you got 5 years, so you're going to have to spend about $7,000 on this AC system. That might happen in year 2 or 3. It might happen when it's 12, 13 years old. So, we do make a plan and we do try to get these properties to perform against that plan. But things do happen. We cannot guarantee an NOI or a certain income level or a certain rent. But yeah, we definitely lay all that out and make sure that we get these assets to perform to the best of their ability.
So what happens when you get hired for someone, an owner hires you, your company, and but the property is not performing well. What do you guys do then?
There's a handful of things. It really depends is it the tenant is not paying rent? That's a different side. Is it, man, it's not being able to be rented, like it's sitting vacant. That's something we're dealing with right now with a handful of owners. So we'll look and try to find the root of the problem. So let's just say if the property is vacant, Richard, we've had this happen a lot where it's like, listen, I can't sell the property. Interest rates have come up, and so asset prices have either flattened or come down a little bit. So owners are not able to command the prices they could in 21, 22, right after COVID. So what we'll do is we'll say, okay, you can't sell it, and let's see what we can do to rent it. Is it comparable to the other properties in the area? Are the finishes nice? Is there something we need to do to renovate that? So we'll help troubleshoot that. We just got a client the other day who was dealing with an eviction. A tenant hadn't paid rent in 4 months. So they came to us and they're like, listen, I can't get this tenant to pay. They're claiming mold. They're scaring me with this. So we come in and we're on the process of getting that tenant out. So it really depends on whether they're not responding to leads, they're not responding or presenting a property with professional photos, or could it be where they're not enforcing their policies on the lease? Is it, the tenants are being nice, or they're being nice to the tenants and giving them leeway, and then the tenants start taking advantage, and next thing you know, you're 3 or 4 months behind on rent and you got to go through an eviction. So that's the thing that when we onboard, you'll have a strategy call and we'll lay everything out like what are you looking for, Richard? What is the issue with the property, or why are you looking to hire a property manager? And that's when we'll start diving down and going down that trail, whatever it is. Is it again the leasing? Is it the maintenance? Is it the tenant? And then we'll help get to the problem of that. And sometimes we can help the owners, and sometimes we can't. And I think we do a pretty good job of being honest. Like this is we're seeing the same $2,500 a month in rent, and so I don't think we can get you 2,700. And we just try to be honest and make sure that we lay out what we can and can't do. I don't want to ever overpromise and underdeliver.
And how often do you communicate with the owner in regards to financial reports and other stuff?
Yeah, so initially when a new owner comes on, they don't know us from Adam, right? They don't trust us. So what we typically do in the beginning is there's a lot of communication with the owner. There might be a couple times a week, but once that property gets leased, rent starts coming in. We have less than an 8 in 1,000 eviction rate. So out of all 1,000 tenants that we place, we evict less than 8 of them. So odds are that tenant's going to pay rent, everything's going to smooth out. And when that happens, we send a report once a month with all your financials. If you want to dive in more, we'll do that, but we'll do the monthly, and then quarterly, you'll get a video from your asset manager that lays out, hey, here's how your property performed over the quarter. Just be mindful, we've got a turn coming up, the tenant submitted notice, or hey, remember about that HVAC, we've got an aging HVAC system, or we've got an aging roof that we'll probably need to get taken care of. And then annually, we also do a review, Richard, where we're like big picture stuff. Like, is this property, here's last year's P&L. Is this property performing? No, it's not. Okay, well, here's what we pulled to see what the property's worth. And you might like that number, you might not. And then we can make a call of, okay, let's plan to sell this, but let's get another tenant in there right now. It's not a good time to sell. Or, hey, it is a perfect time to sell. Let's get it fixed up and get it sold.
And how often do you think owners should visit the property?
Good question. I would say 60 to 70% of our owners are out of state or at least out of the city. And so out of Houston. So we have owners that have never stepped foot in some of their properties. I have properties that I have personally never stepped foot in that I own. And I think that it depends if the company you're using or you're doing your own self-management. I would get in there at least once a year. But for us, we do once a year and we do everything electronically. So we'll send you those reports when we get them. So we have a move out report when the tenant moves in. We have a once a year report right before we offer the renewal to make sure that, hey, the property looks good, the tenant's paying, yep, everything looks great, let's offer the renewal. And then when that tenant moves out, we'll do a move out inspection. So we use the move out inspection, move in versus the move out to determine, hey, here's the stuff we need to charge against their security deposit. And then you'll have that one every year to see how the condition is. And these reports are like 200 to 300 pages, Richard. So you really don't need to, if you have a good manager, you have somebody, local boots on the ground where they can take some pictures for you. But if you're doing your own, or the company you're using, or you're using a property management company, I would go with at least once a year, somebody get eyes on that property.
And how do you filter to make sure that you're hiring, you're getting a good company from a bad company?
That is probably the hardest thing, because there is what I say, a long feedback loop. So you hire a manager, they place a tenant for you, and you think everything's great. Rent comes in the next month, you're happy, you feel in a good spot, you feel like you made a right decision. Then the tenant doesn't pay. Then the tenant doesn't pay. Or then you get hit with crazy little ticky-tack fees, and you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? What happened here? So it might take some time to understand that. So it's very difficult to say, I think, with exactly, because people do the reviews and they have those scrubbers that scrub reviews. So you'll see companies with 4.8, 4.9 Google reviews. And you're like, is that real? It's hard to tell. But I would say the big thing is try to speak with them and get everything to lay out, like all their fee structure, what they do. And I think if you jive with that person or that company, I think that's probably one of the big things. It's like, are they trying to sell me into this on something I don't need? I would also recommend making sure that the company has been around a little while. I know I learned so much over the last almost 15 years of doing management. I thought I knew what a lot when I was doing it for 5 years. I knew next to nothing, and I know more now at 10, and even more at 15. So I think that about 10-year mark, find a manager that's been around for about 10 years if you're looking for a company, and then also make sure that this company or the company that you're looking for is not, one of those big tech focused companies that's going to be sold to somebody else at some point. I think, Richard, I've seen that. We've actually made an acquisition of a smaller property management company, and the owners don't like it because, I mean, imagine you hire me and you and I have a relationship and I'm your asset manager, we're rocking and rolling, and all of a sudden somebody else is a whole different company, a whole different structure, a whole different fee structure. It can just get really messy. So I would make sure that you got somebody local, established, and then call them and see how their website is, see if you jive with them. Anybody can talk is cheap, right? So anybody can say anything, but I think once you actually get into look at the fees, see how transparent they are, and also make sure that they're local, and are they going to be somebody that's going to be gone in a year, 2 years, sold to somebody else?
They say referrals are good.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And we'll always provide references if somebody needs that. Or ask your friends and family, like if you know other property investors, ask them who they use. But I would definitely find local companies. We've seen this a lot. We get a lot of clients from large national companies because, they're sitting in California or, New York or Florida or Illinois, and they're managing properties in Houston, and they might have 3 or 4 or 5 different offices. And it can be very, cumbersome for some of those folks with no local staff, or they have processes and properties all over the country, and it can be very difficult to get that local expertise.
Now, how do you make sure you don't get robbed?
That is a very good question. I have heard some horror stories about property managers saying properties are vacant and they're not, and they're collecting rent and stealing it from the owners. I think that's few and far between, but you always do have some bad apples. I think if they're not giving you the information that you request, like, let me see the signed lease agreement. Do you have a portal where you can see the tenant paid and the rent that you have on your lease is $2,000 a month? That's the money that you see coming in. We have everything tied into our property management software. So a tenant pays on there, our management fee, any other expenses come out, and then that distribution is made to the owner. So everything's tied in. And we have a bookkeeper and an accounting firm that checks everything. So we have that kind of verification. But if you're working with a smaller mom and pop company, or somebody that might be selling you money or sending you checks, then I would definitely cross-reference between what's the lease say, what's the start date of the lease, and just double check all that. Unfortunately, there are some unscrupulous property management companies that have taken money from owners.
When it's time to hire, because I hear certain place in the States, when you start having 16 units, it's mandatory to have a property manager. So how does that work?
Yeah, I think it's all personal preference. And the reason I say that is because let's just say that you're an executive at a company and you buy a rental property just as a diversification tool. Well, your time is very valuable. We charge, some of our packages are down around $100 a month. So for somebody making 2 or 300 grand a year, they're probably not worth them to do this 10, 15, $20 an hour work. So they might hire immediately, right when they get a first property. But then you'll have some folks who they do this full time. That's all their business is, real estate. And they might, like you said, grow to 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, 60 doors before they're like, I need to hire a property manager. So I would say it really depends and some people have spouses that stay home with the kids, and it's a perfect kind of part-time role for them to do. So I don't think there's a magic like number specific, because everybody's job and how much they want to be involved is very different. If you want to be involved and you don't have a full-time gig, you could probably do 20, 30, 40 doors before you start getting to the position where you're like, I need some help. Um, Again, if you have a job that's demanding and you value your time and you're concerned about, depending upon where you're at, California, New York, Chicago, they have some very different landlord tenant laws than we do in Texas. So that's another thing. How much are you going to stay abreast of that? How much risk? When you hire, you're reducing your risk. So that's another thing to take into consideration is how much risk do you want to absorb? When a tenant says mold, do you know how to handle that? Or is that going to be a very, very scary thing when a tenant doesn't pay rent? Are you comfortable going through the eviction process or being confrontational? Richard, some owners really don't like being confrontational, and that's why they let the tenants keep going, getting further behind. And next thing you know, we got to evict somebody.
What are the average fees?
Yeah, so we $100, $200 a month, depending upon the package. We go up to $300 a month. Some folks will use that 8 to 10% of gross rents. We do a flat fee, which is, I think, better, because if rents continue to rise, now I know right now they're getting flat, but if rents continue to rise and go up $100, you're not paying any more than a management fee. Or if you have a $3,000 a month property, you're still paying that $200 a month, instead of having to pay 10%, $300 a month in a management fee. And then there are some other little ancillary things, if you're going to lease, maintenance coordination, stuff like that. But a good rule of thumb or rough number is 8 to 10% of rents, or, figure a couple $100 a month.
Some liabilities that you guys put in place.
Yeah. So I think one of the big things that we do is we make sure that our lease is not a standard Texas Association Realtors lease. Our lease is an internal one that we have modified over thousands of tenants, and we have that reviewed with a Texas licensed attorney. And so I pay between $5,000 and $10,000, Richard, every year to have that brought up to code. The Texas property code changes every 2 years. So you want to start with an ironclad lease first and foremost, to make sure that when that tenant comes in, you're reducing risk.
When I speak about liability, I was speaking about the liability protection.
Yeah. Like the things that the safeguards we put in place for owners, so they reduce their liability.
Well, if something happens, a tenant wants to sue the owner, whatever, these things.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that you would do is try to mitigate that risk. Like if you see a curb or a stairwell missing a handrail, well, you want to go take care of that so you don't get into that situation. I think those are kind of first and foremost, because majority of lawsuits or TREC complaints, violations, come around security deposits and damages. What was damages, what wasn't. Then the other side is liability. Like you said, somebody falls and breaks their leg. This is why we don't allow trampolines. We don't allow risky behavior, people to have businesses on the property, things like that. But once you get into the liability train, that's when we would hire an attorney. And we do require the tenants to have insurance. We require the owners to have insurance. So from an owner's perspective, we're fighting on the same side of the table against the tenant from a liability perspective. But once that happens, Richard, like once we actually get a claim, like we can provide the information, but that's when the owner and us sit on the same side of the table and start trying to defend the claim. And I can tell you, we have not had that happen, because we do a very, very robust job on the turnovers. But once you get to that, it's kind of out. It's just like why we have an accounting firm. It's like that's law and litigious piece. So we would bring in the attorneys to handle that if we do get into an actual claim. That makes sense.
What are some mistakes you see owners do when they work with the property management company?
I would say probably the biggest one is relinquish control. So owners have sometimes a very difficult, so we talked about this earlier. There's several different types of service you get with management companies. Some is full, soup to nuts, everything's handled. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to be in the same city, same time zone, wherever. There are some, though, companies that require you to be local or might even expect you to guide them through decisions. They might say, Richard, what do you think we should do on this repair? Richard, what do you think about this tenant? Richard, what do you think here? And you're almost hiring an assistant. And we are very much the former, where we'll handle everything. So we see owners struggle with sometimes is relinquishing control, trusting us that, hey, you've hired us just like you hire an accounting firm or a financial advisor. You're hiring us to do our job. And we need some level of control. We need to be able to make a decision quickly when the tenant reports this. We need to be able to approve tenants on your behalf. And some folks have trouble with that. Whereas there are some companies that $75 property management that are national brands that, plug and play. They're not giving you any unique service or unique processes or systems or anything specialized. And they're going to be more of the type where you're going to have to be involved and have to help them out a lot. So I think just making sure your expectations are set. I think that's probably the big thing that I see. If you're going into hiring an assistant property management company and you think it's full service, that's going to be a big mistake. Or you go into a full service company thinking that you're hiring assistant. That's probably one of the bigger things I see when owners work with property management companies.
Uh, Two more questions.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm purchasing a 100 unit tomorrow,
Okay.
and I hire a company. Well, let's say for example, I hire you. What do you guys do in the next 90 days?
So we only manage up to like 5 to 8 units, depending upon. We specialize in single family, but I would say, let's just say it's a 100-door portfolio of single family properties. The first thing we would do is we would get all the documentation together and we would make sure all your leases match, they're all up to date. Who is, are the rents all being collected? We found, Richard, we have literally brought on owners and they ran out of paper on the lease. So they wrote it in pen on the back and signed it. I mean, some of this stuff is not kosher, could get you into legal issues. So that's the first thing we do. What's all the documentation show? And then once we go through that, okay, everything matches, all the leases match, all the pet fees match, all the deposits match. From an accounting perspective, this is in a good place. That's when we go, if there's not stuff that matches, which usually there's not, especially when you're making an acquisition and you're buying it usually as a value add opportunity or maybe trying to increase NOI, then we'll get into, and this is all happening within the first few weeks, then we'll get into changing leases, updating them, reinforcing policies. We found some leases when we bring owners on that they never charged them utilities. The owner was paying all the utilities, even though the lease said that the tenant needed to pay it. So we'll come in and we'll update those ledgers and make all those corrections. So within that first 90 days, is the documentation correct? Let's get that all corrected, get the leases to match. If they're expired leases, we get tenants on new leases. If they don't want to get on new leases, then we start negotiating of, okay, do we want to increase rent or not? Do we want to give this tenant a notice to vacate and be able to release that unit? So those are the kind of the plans, Richard, that we would start with is documentation first, make sure you're getting the most money you can or everything matches so you're not missing security deposits. And then number 3 is making sure that we're strategically in a good spot of, okay, we're going to get rid of these 4 or 5 tenants and we're going to do turns on these because it's a good time or what have you. So then start developing and executing on that plan.
In 2 minutes, let's say I'm purchasing a property and there's a property management company there. Is it a good thing? Is it a good thing to keep that company or get a new one?
I think so. I think the property management company that owns that or that manages that initially is probably good because they already have everything set up. They're familiar with the tenant. They're familiar with the property. I think starting out with them is wise. I think also understanding what you're getting into is wise. So if you look at their agreement and it doesn't make sense, I think you could definitely, then find somebody else. However, I think keeping the first property manager in there when you buy an acquisition is wise.
And a quick one I forgot. How does the contract look like when you sign with the property management company?
Yeah, so we use a month-to-month agreement. I think that's something that's unique. Most management companies will do 1, 2. The longest I've seen, Richard, is a 3-year agreement. We believe in earning your business every month, but that's one thing. All of them look different. There's no, I mean, Texas has a standard one, but we draft up our own just like our lease. So they all look a little different, but they should talk about and very clearly lay out pricing, roles and responsibilities, your expectations, how much if there is any fees to onboard, if there's any fees to terminate, what kind of guarantees you get. It should lay all that stuff out.
Hmm. Where can people learn more about you and follow you?
Yeah, I think if you guys are interested or have properties in the greater Houston area, or just want some information on rental properties, I do stuff like this a lot, and videos. You can go to emersonpropertymanagement.com and find all the information you need there.